Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session for September 4th, 2012. Commissioners, before you have the agenda. So at this time, I would accept a motion to approve the work session agenda. And we would move, with the changes, item 4-8. Move item 4-8. So it's up on the agenda. Is he here? Is he? Okay. Okay. Yeah, there are some additions in the back. But is Dennis here to? Okay. Okay. So I have a motion and a second with the additions. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Also, for those in attendance, a courtesy reminder: if you have a mobile device, to please put it on silent or vibrate. Okay, so we're going to start with 4.8 then. Mm-hmm.
This is the grant application. Well, we actually received notification of approval of this funding. This is very similar to what we did with the Porter Farm, where we got a smaller grant and we used it as leverage and match for a larger grant. So we are asking today that you accept that grant. They are meeting this afternoon to complete their end of it at 5:15, and Dennis was here a few minutes ago. I'm not sure where they were. He may have been outside waiting for Mr. Barrier, but hi. Mr. Barrier's here if you have any questions as well.
Commissioners, do you have any questions concerning, this is a grant from the Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund concerning the barrier farmland?
One other piece of information I probably should have offered is that this is adjacent to the Porter Farm, adjacent to the conservation easement that we've been working on purchasing currently, the last couple of grants that you've seen. This is adjacent to that, so it will be an extension of that.
What's the amount of money the county's paying?
We are not paying anything. We have some staff time included, some legal work and things like that, but no, it's all budgeted activity. It's not anything new match or cash.
Okay.
There's no federal money in this either?
The money that we're receiving is federal money.
I thought it was state money.
I'm sorry. I'm getting confused. Yes, this is state money we will be using to leverage federal money.
And you'll get federal money too? I thought
I
thought somewhere in here it said that the county had to match it and the farmer had to match it.
The farmer is matching it, and we are matching it through our in-kind match for with staff and purchase services. So, like what we pay for legal services,
But
which is
didn't he
part of
show
our
the
budget.
total amount being $370,000 somewhere in here? I don't remember where it was at, but I thought I looked at it yesterday.
This is $179,089.6 that is state money, and $89,600 that is being offered by the applicant, and then we will use that as leverage to apply for the larger federal grant.
That will make it to $370,000.
Correct.
Who gets the money?
The applicant, Mr. Barrier.
And that's on 35 acres of land, right?
Correct.
Why does the farmer have to put up money on his own land?
Well, it makes it a more attractive proposal. That all of these grants are looking for match of some sort, and obviously if it doesn't come from us, it needs to come from somewhere. So this is a way for it to be more attractive and make it a better application.
But the money all goes back to the farmer?
Correct. We won't, none of this will come to Cabarrus County other than flowing through us. Staff-wise, none of it will come to us.
And that's on that land forever, correct?
Correct.
So pretty much what all the money's doing is buying the value of the,
Yes, it's buying the value
of the development
so they
rights
don't lose anything, so to speak, from selling it.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's go back to 3.1, which is an update on the QSCB projects. Mr. Crabtree is unable to be with us today to do his update, so he will do that at the regular meeting. Mr. Whitkey is here. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to take a moment to indicate that our schools are open and educating children today. And it was nip and tuck on a few of the projects, but we did get them all done. And we are moving forward with all of our projects as discussed previously. I would say, in looking at this particular chart, if you look all the way to the far right, thank you for that comment. If you go all the way to the right, we have a percentage of completion listed there for all the projects. And I'll basically talk about that and indicate that really, for the most part, many projects are nearing completion, as you'll see by those numbers. There are a few, there's probably 4 or 5 as I count them, that are just getting off the ground. The gymnasium project at Northwest Cabarrus High School, that's in the planning stages. The electrical vault updates and code improvements at Central Cabarrus High School is just beginning. What we call the breaker panel, electrical panel testing and corrections is just beginning. We are going back now and going to bid more of the roof replacement at J.N. Freeze because there are funds available there. And lastly, we just began the IT upgrades for Weinkauf Elementary School. So those 5 projects are just getting underway. The bidding for Northwest Cabarrus High School, I haven't talked to the architect this week, but we were looking at a late October bid date for that particular project. So with that, I guess I would take you to the, excuse me, are there any questions on that particular chart? We haven't really moved a great deal of money around to this point. As you know, I mentioned last time before you that we were presenting a prioritization list, if you will, of the postponed projects to our board this month, and then next month I'll bring it back to your board. And so you'll be seeing that in October. Any other questions on this chart? No? Okay. And if we go to the milestones, there again, it gives you a little bit more description of the projects. And again, we're really pretty much dialing down. All the projects that were supposed to be completed by start of school have in fact been accomplished. We're now in the punch list, if you will. That's really where the engineers, either what I think we've listed it as either testing and balancing, which means they're going through literally room by room and verifying that what the design engineer had specified as the airflow in the room is correct, and that's what they're actually getting. And that we're also maintaining the temperatures that we established as our parameters for those rooms. So that's being done on many of the projects. And then other projects such, and I'll just take windows and doors, for example, at the window replacement at Central Cabarrus. That's probably going to remain at 80%. We're doing what we call punch list, or cleaning up the details and the final work on a large portion of the windows and doors. But the gymnasium is something that we chose to wait on because we knew we were not going to get it all done before start of school. And so the school asked us to hold on replacing those windows until the Christmas break. And at that point, we will finish that portion of that project. But everything else is pretty much on schedule or ahead of schedule and going very well. Any questions?
When is the dining room furniture for Concord High School going to be delivered?
That's been bid. Trying to remember the exact.
I mean, because you're down here, you have the current status is punch list, so I would imagine that's done.
Not on the furniture, no, sir. On the buildings it is, and it's being occupied today. But the furniture itself was bid last week.
Okay.
I believe I want to say there was 5 or 6 packages, if you will, for that, meaning just groups of furniture. And we got everything bid except for one particular type of furniture, and that we only received 2 bids on, so we're going to have to go back out to bid that. But we're meeting with the principal tomorrow to review that issue. And we basically will have all the furniture, once we get the purchase orders cut for that, delivery is in 60 days after release of the purchase orders.
When do you anticipate the release of the purchase orders?
Hopefully this week.
Thank
One thing I would clarify, Commissioner, is that we have to verify, we're looking right now at making certain that what the bidders have proposed to us does meet specifications. So that may, depending on when we get the information from them, that may take a few more days. But we're hopeful that either by the end of this week or early next week, we'll have the purchase orders in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have 3.2, which is the report from the Council for a Sustainable Local Economy. And Commissioners, you have that as a hard copy at your seats. It's not on your iPads. So Shannon Johnson is here, Lori Clay, and John Yip. Josh, sorry.
That's all right.
Apologize.
No problem.
I'll introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. I'm known far and wide, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lori Clay. I'm the chair of the Council for Sustainable Local Economy. I own a business here in Cabarrus County, and I also run a business for my father that is very happy when we have weather like this outside because we deal with emergency power. So we like it when the lightning knocks all the lights out. So it's good for business. So I want to give you an update on where our council is and how we're progressing, and give you kind of an overview of some of the things that have changed and how we are currently working. We started last year with 3 committees, and we continue to have those committees, but our council seems to be working more as projects. So we are moving to being more of a project-based council at this time. Some of the projects that we're working on, we have been since we started and will continue. We've been working on a Think Cabarrus First project, which is an educational outreach program that teaches folks about the benefits of buying local and doing business on a local level. We currently have 57 members. Our goal is to have 200 members by June 30th, 2013. That leaves 140 members for us to get between now and next year. So we feel like we are progressing at a reasonable rate. One of the other projects that we've been working on and has been going on, and Josh will tell you more about it, is one of the committees that I spoke of, the regulatory committee, went on a fact-finding mission through the winter months. They had outreaches in different areas of the county to get feedback on how businesses had been affected by policies, regulations that the county had set in place. And Josh has chaired that project, and he'll be able to give you more details on that. And then we have another project that is in the beginning stages, that is an outreach of this, or an extension of this project that Josh has been working on, which deals with local purchasing. And as I said, that project's in the beginning stages. So, Josh?
Good afternoon. Thanks for your time today. Basically just trying to report today on the Cabarrus County Council for Sustainable Local Economy. We have as Lori had mentioned, the regulatory committee. I head that. And we came up with a few things to try to elicit some information from the community. The charge from you all, county commissioners, was to identify obstacles in the business community of Cabarrus County. One effort to identify these obstacles was that we held this listening tour. Last year, the state had done one, and they kind of did a whole regulatory reform bill based off of it. We obviously did a much smaller scaled, much smaller goals, but wanted to at least go out and get the community to provide some feedback. And what I have here is about 5 pages. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th pages are actually kind of the statements and quotes from everybody. I won't go into those today. You guys have those. If you have any follow-up questions, certainly feel free to ask us, and we can discuss those further. But what we did come across were the 3 meetings were, one was at the Kannapolis train station, one was at Concord Vintage Motor Club, and one was held in Mount Pleasant. Did some advertising, try to get people out to come to these. Had small turnout, frankly, but the people that did show up were passionate and definitely had some things to say that we believe are worth looking into a little further. As I put there in that 2nd paragraph, our intention, of course, was not to stir up any regulatory trouble, but just rather see what concerns were out there and try to pull in some information. I bolded the quote. I feel that might be a little strong, because I believe you could probably find in any county and any state in this country, this same quote would be said by some business owner throughout. But it was said at meeting, so I wanted to highlight that for you all. And as it states, there's a problem with the development process. As a customer and a taxpayer, they treat you more as an adversary. They take joy in seeing you sweat and making it easier than coordinating with the other municipalities, whether it's Concord or Cabarrus County. Again, that's small sample size. It was a person, and it probably could be attributed to any county. But I wanted to, again, I tried the best. When we put this together, we tried our best to give you exactly the words that were given by the community. This is not a Josh Nip, seminar here. All right, just getting into what actually happened in Concord, we had about 30 to 35 people show up, and kind of the theme was, frankly, in Concord, as I don't think any of you would be surprised, but it was more of a city oriented approach than a county. What the things that were brought up seemed to fall more to what the city government would cover than what you all would. But there's obviously a lot of overlap, and we understand that. But the things that they hit on the highlights were the permit process, department concerns, timing, communication was the biggest one, and I'll get to that here in a second. The ordinances, whether you want to call that the UDO, you want to call it the county code, whatever you want to call that. And then local service purchasing. Mount Pleasant, we had some of the same, as you can see there. I won't list them all out for you, but I want to point one thing, whereas I'm aware, you're aware, that only the county commissioners adopt the ordinances. There is a perception at the Mount Pleasant meeting that they kept stating that the non-elected officials are the ones drafting this up, and just wanted to make sure that was out there. That's not me speaking. That's from the people who actually showed up at the meeting. The biggest part from Mount Pleasant was the education on the codes and ordinances. A few raised the concern that no one knows what is in there, and I think that's kind of pretty consistent across the county. And then one person raised the idea that, again, the unelected officials, but that's not really me speaking. Last, I did want to say the Kannapolis turnout. There were only 2 citizens. It did not have anything to do with the regulatory reform, but I did tell them I would certainly bring their concerns. It was the lunch bunch. I believe you guys have touched on that last budget, but did want to state that they were there at every meeting and voiced their concerns. And if you want to read what they said, it's, again, on page 3, 4, and 5. Last thing I'll get to here, if you want to flip that second page talks about 2 things. One, again, recommendations is still rather weak. We plan on coming back to you all here in the next couple of months with some further findings, some further information. And then the second part are action items that we have done going forward. The recommendations are, the biggest one I think is a more specific point of contact on the county website. If you go on the website now, it's kind of listed out, hey, planning and zoning or licensing or things like that, and it's just, you have the names. You have the 7 or 8 names that are in that department. That's fine to an extent. However, we would suggest, and this is maybe a personal thing, the North Carolina Bar, I am an attorney in Charlotte. I do live here in Concord. But the North Carolina Bar has a pretty good contacts list, and I would suggest we look at that and kind of compare it. What they do is they take the umbrella and they kind of siphon it down a little bit. And each individual thing, if you have a question about CLE hours for attorneys, you ask this person directly. If you have a question about ethics, you ask this person directly. If you have a question about whatever it may be, you can go each individual person. They try their best to point out who your contact persons within those departments. I think that's something kind of a good model to maybe follow. Second part was I call it a quasi A to Z guide. We acknowledge the impossibility to pigeonhole everything, but when you get into licensing, business licensing, you get into development, it's impossible to do. Hey, person who doesn't do this every day shows up and says, hey, how do I develop a 15-acre plot of land in Cabarrus County? Can't give you an A to Z, but I do believe we can come up with somewhat of a mini cheat sheet, if you would, at least that first step of who to contact, who to go to. And then the third part there was the review purchasing procedures, which leads into our action items that we did do as the CSLE. We have started and we held a meeting in, I think that was May or June, with the county, with the city, with a few other players in the county. Brought them in, kind of talk about their purchasing procedures in the, whether it's up to $99,000, whether it's up to $10,000, services versus goods, things like that. More so, not to pick anything apart or critique anything, more just to educate ourselves, 1, and 2, the goal would be to educate the business community on how to get on the list to bid on some of these contracts in Cabarrus County. We did look into it, as you guys are well aware, I'm sure. You can't give local preference, but there are some small things that we could do to help our own local community when it comes to that. And then last, I do suggest the regulatory committee we want to look into a couple things. One is further conversations with department heads and intake employees being the people who actually deal with the applications and deal with the plans and deal with that. 'Cause I feel they know more than just about anyone of what causes the most roadblocks to successful business going forward. And then last was I would like the regulatory committee just look into the code of ordinances a little bit more, just small things. Like, I throw one example out there, not to pick at it, but it mentioned, if you look at the, I think, third hash mark there, it talks about a public safety services department, which we don't really have a name, but it does state that that's where you're supposed to send your permit to, and it had to do with some sort of, I think, permit on buildings or something. But just little things like that, if we could go through the code, maybe clean that up a little bit. It's not really talking about politically cleaning, any political debate, more of just kind of tightening it up, because as I'm sure you're well aware, people like to focus on any excuse you can give them. If you give them an excuse to point, hey, this is wrong here, therefore they throw the whole code out, or the whole code shouldn't apply to them. So just little things like that I think our committee can do going forward. So that's about all I have. I did throw a little thing there why low turnout, but that is the extent of what we found so far. Like I said, I think we'll be coming back here, and hopefully, if you guys will have us, in another couple months to discuss a little bit more of what we find with kind of the intake employees and this purchasing procedure. We'd like to give you a little presentation on that. So any questions?
Was it ever pointed out, I mean, I thought about the UDO keeps coming up because obviously the city's more a city issue because the county never adopted the UDO.
Right.
So there's nothing really we can do about the UDO.
The best thing I can say, I tried to head off at the very beginning of every one of these three things was, hello, everyone, this is a county function. Please bring your county concerns. We do understand there is an overlap, and frankly, we weren't opposed to getting that feedback on city issues that they may have had, and we wouldn't be opposed to maybe putting something together to present to cities, but we are just a county council, so we were just interested in the county stuff. I provided you that information just because that's what was said. It wasn't a trying to. I think we tried our best to not let them attribute city issues to the county. I don't know if you can ever get that really across to everyone.
Is there a way that we can look at like a how-to video almost? Because many times when the other day I was trying to get Netflix to go through our Wii and typed in how to hook up Wii or Netflix through Wii, and there's somebody on the video saying, this is how you do it. And it was very helpful to me. So I'm wondering if some of these points that you're talking about, is there a way that we could internally have a YouTube video that when someone says, I need to get an application, and someone actually walk it through almost to YouTube. I don't know if that may be too low level, but I'm just saying that also it helps someone to look at it and say, okay, this is who I'm going to deal with, or this is the department I need to go through.
Sure.
And I'm not saying it needs to be done in the next 30 days, but maybe working in conjunction with Channel 22 or somebody in that department to be able to create some short videos of how-tos when they're talking about, some of this information.
Right, staff, we've already on the staff level started talking about this. We've also brought in the cities as well to talk about that. And once we sort of modify the process, then yeah, it would be probably a pretty good marketing campaign to get out, whether it's on video, whether it's brochures, whether it's just pamphlets that we can pass out and make available in different locations. But we are working on that process now.
Okay.
So.
Also, I understand the UDA was not adopted by the county, but in that vein, maybe reaching out to the public relations directors of each one of the, there's some acronym, I don't know what it is, but public information officers, PIOs, right? In each of the cities, along with the county, to do a joint project. If that's not on the list, I would suggest that maybe to talk about the UDO.
Sure. We did not adopt it.
Right.
However, we do have an ordinance.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that's in there is in the UDO and a lot of it in ours. So over the years, our ordinances it's progressed in a certain direction. So one thing we've discussed with Jonathan and Kelly and Susie Morris is, and the Planning Commission is, they are in the process now of going back and reviewing the ordinance as in its current condition and reviewing section by section. And what I've asked them to do, and also asked Lori and her council to do, is to, when there's something that's related to development or commercial business, to pass it on, have their eyes on it first, giving them feedback as practitioners of it every day in their small businesses. And how does this affect our business? And how do we measure, or how do we weight the aesthetics or the impacts on adjacent properties with the impacts on how much it costs to develop or to start a new business? So we want to get their feedback first. Of course, it's still going to go to the planning board, and we've passed on. I talked with Ms. Clay as well, that yes, we want you to have the opportunity to make this, but don't get discouraged if it gets to the planning board and then onto the board, and it may not get adopted as they see, but at least you're getting your opportunity to give your opinion and voice your concerns on what are those obstacles or what are those regulations that may have a negative impact on it. So we're working on that. So that's moving forward. Don't know when the first set of changes that are coming through. I think it's, I don't know, Susie, you back there? Yeah, you may want to, or Shannon, you may know. They're looking at a couple of different sections coming up, and I don't know if it's landscaping or parking or curb and gutter, or I'm not sure what it is,
Well,
but we
there
are going
earlier,
to move forward with
or
that.
later in here is talking about landscaping and the use of trees outside that is not indigenous to Cabarrus County or North Carolina, and certainly would think that we need to,
Yeah, we're a little confused on that, because our current ordinance does allow for a
that's
couple
what I
different
figured.
options.
But I think it would be good that, if someone goes to the extent to say, I got a landscaper and all these
Right.
shrubs and
Sure.
things that I'm gonna plant are indigenous to North Carolina, I would be surprised if we don't accept
Yeah, in
that.
fact, it would behoove us to encourage that, simply because if you put them in and they die, then they're not serving the purpose of what they need to be in for anyway. So not only the expense, they're not serving the purpose.
And then the last thing that I would bring up is, I would encourage you to review the purchasing procedures, and I would like for us to consider adopting a policy of purchasing some percent, provided it is a competitive price. When I say competitive, we need to look into those ramifications, but I don't want to be held hostage to local, but at the same time, if I'd like to support local, and whatever procedures we put into place or consider to put into place and then put into place, I'd be willing to go to the municipality that I'm a liaison with and encourage them to adopt the similar thing. And each one of the commissioners are liaisons for the different municipalities, and I would encourage each one of the commissioners to take that on as a cause to go to their liaison cities.
Right. The purchasing project that we're working on, even though I said it's in the beginning stages, part of that is to find what the purchasing procedures are across the county, and at least see where they vary, and if there is, and we don't know the answer to that as of yet, but to see if there is an opportunity there for those to be more unified, so that you could end up, because Mount Pleasant and Harrisburg or whatever all have similar policies, you could potentially have a leaning toward local there again if it's competitively priced. But first off, it's finding out where the variances are across the county.
I mean, I would encourage, because I think that's a great opportunity to help out the people that are here locally. And, I look at, as I said, I've always said, to me, it's like a bullseye, or a dartboard, as you start central and then start moving out, to,
Right.
Once you start trying to find the services.
Right.
Thank you.
The only thing I've got, and I've been a little bit because it's not us, hopefully it's not us, but I think it's something that in our communication with the city, but also continue to preach this, always been a pet peeve of mine, is put yourself in the shoes of the developer or the builder. Bring a plan, I think coming out of this, you bring a plan, the plan is reviewed, you get a list of 20 things you need to correct, you go back and correct those 20 things, rather than coming back and saying, okay, let's check those 20 things, see if you corrected those 20 things, you come back and it starts all over again, so you walk out with another list of 20 things you gotta get fixed, and that goes back and forth. I know we had that happen with the jail project, of how do you fix that, because I think it does not, it just like a game of gotcha to me, and I don't know if it's coming out of this as well, and I don't mean to, they're not here to defend themselves, and we're not here to hold the city accountable, but I think there's got to be some agreement reached on that. To me, if you come in, you get a list of stuff that's corrected, you come back and that's corrected, and maybe one more time it's reviewed, but once that's done, that should be it. There should be an agreement, I think, that the city should say that's it. If our people, staff is not able to find that, it takes them 3 different times to review, or 3 or 4 different times to review a plan to start finding these things. It's just me just getting picky about things that they don't need to get picky about. You know.
That's because every time you find out what the rules are, they change them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a different person's interpretation, too.
Right. If you don't stay with the same person, you get a different answer from everybody you talk to.
Right.
In government especially.
And I've found that in just casual discussions that I've had with folks who've been through the building process, that's what they run into. And I'm sure Josh found that more formally, and we'll submit that to you at another time. But that seems to be an issue that people run into often.
It's a very in-depth report, and I'm looking forward to your recommendations. So
Thank you.
thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you all very much. Next up, Debbie Brannan and Todd Shanley are here with the IT department. A status report on collaborative technology services with Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools.
I do have a PowerPoint that's not in your document. The clerk has a copy of it if you'd like. Sorry, I worked on it over the holiday weekend. I didn't get it in time. So about a year ago, you guys, the Board of Commissioners, approved an interlocal agreement with Kannapolis City Schools and Cabarrus County Schools. So I wanted to give a project status report of where we are on our collaborative technology services. In May of 2011, a team of financial and technology representatives from Cabarrus County government, Cabarrus County schools, and Kannapolis City Schools began meeting to collaborate on technology strategies and resource allocation. This team looked at the strategic vision and goals of Cabarrus County's Board of Commissioners. One of the stated goals for the commissioners is to use resources wisely and responsibly by protecting assets, minimizing risk, creating partnerships, and using technology to maximize the value of county investments, expenditures, and services. The Cabarrus County Schools vision, one of their visions is to provide 21st century resources through responsible and efficient use of funding. And Kannapolis City Schools' strategic goal to ensure appropriate funding to educate 21st century learners. Those things we all took into consideration and looked at some of the common school technology goals, and one was to ensure technology resources are hosted in a secure and reliable environment. Out of this came the data center co-location. They also wanted to establish and maintain strong technology infrastructure to support current and future demands. A lot of the schools are worried about the state online testing that's coming up, bring your own device, and the one-to-one initiatives. Schools also want to maximize existing resources using virtual server and virtual desktop technology. And they're working to be in a position to consume the North Carolina Education Cloud services. So we drafted an interlocal agreement in the July timeframe, and then after incorporating changes requested by the different boards, that local agreement was executed by Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners with each school board in October. And in November, the Board of Commissioners funded a data center co-location for each of the school systems into the Cabarrus County data centers. We had, along the way, identified some risk. When you start collaborating, there's always, and consolidating, there's risk along the way. So we took steps to verify that we wouldn't negatively impact current funding streams by locating the schools in the county data center. The E-rate program provides discounts to make technology affordable for schools. We met with Barry Pace from the North Carolina Department, DPI, to discuss the E-rate requirements and changes based on cloud services. And we're forging new ground, so after discussion back and forth with DPI, it was determined that the projects that we were proposing did not have negatively impact that funding.
Can you explain E-rate?
E-rate is an FCC. It is a discount that's provided to schools to make the telecommunications affordable for schools, and depending on the school's free lunch rate.
Yes, it is the free lunch program.
There's a different percentage discount based on that. So schools, their network connections, their internet connection, and then even at Kannapolis, some hardware, they are able to purchase some hardware through E-rate discounts.
Did you and your staff also help them renegotiate with Time Warner to get a reduced rate for internet access at each one of the schools?
There's specific forms that have to be filled out for that, and we didn't help with that. We did make some recommendations on the size of pipe that should be requested for each school on the network.
Did that realize a savings?
I wouldn't say that maybe there was a savings, but there was definitely, we made sure that the costs, they were coming out of Cabarrus County Schools was coming out of a 5-year agreement, and that those costs dropped. At a minimum, the pipe got fatter. They saw they went from 10 megabit connections to gigabit connections in some sites, or from 100 meg to gigabit connections at all their sites.
And that allows more data to transfer at a higher speed to
Correct.
efficiency within the schools.
It positioned us to pull a lot of the equipment out of the schools to bring it back into our data centers to make it more secure, not have a lot of equipment at those endpoints. Kannapolis is in the 3rd year of their contract right now. It'll be renewed. We'll start working on that with them later this year.
There was also concern from the school system. They have the North Carolina Race to the Top funding, and just wanted to make sure that any projects that we implemented did not impact the funding stream for NC Race to the Top. We also had to consider the network consolidation, security between the 3 networks, their IP conflicts. IP is kind of like a mailing address. If you've got a piece of mail, you can't deliver it to 2 different places. So on the network, if you have some information that's going to one device, it has to know which device to go to, so that's the IP. And then capacity planning. We did employ MCNC to come in and do a network assessment on all 3 networks. Any deficiencies that were found in that report, Cabarrus County IT staff and the county technology staff worked together to resolve those. The technology staff of all 3 systems worked together to divvy out the IP conflicts, so everybody, one person wasn't doing all the changing. We kind of divided that up between the 3 networks, and that was a very good collaborative piece of our project.
And having DPI come in was something that the state already contracts with MCNC and NCREN to have those folks. So there was no cost to the local administrations at all for that to happen, and it was a great piece for us to pick up.
And always with a collaborative project, there's always the question who's in control or who's in charge. So we took steps to, in the interlocal agreement, it was executed between the Board of Commissioners and each individual school district. So we, Cabarrus County IT has a different, roles and responsibilities with each school system. With Cabarrus County School System, we focus specifically on the 3 projects that were in the interlocal agreement. With Kannapolis, we are more of hands-on and in an advisory role. So we are working with them, boots on the ground, to say, hand in hand, reviewing their budget and making recommendations on changes for technology. So the 3 projects that we're working on with Cabarrus County School Systems was the data center relocation, migration to the shared storage area network, and the disaster recovery and high availability. And with Kannapolis City Schools, essentially we have the first three are the same. We had the network preparation in order to do the data center co-location, the server virtualization hosting in our data center, disaster recovery and high availability. We are also pulled in quickly on a state ISIS timekeeper upgrade, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and planning the future desktop virtualization. So with the co-location project, the BOCU funded for this. Essentially what we have now is in the Cabarrus County Data Center, we have servers that are Cabarrus County School Systems, Kannapolis City School Systems, Cabarrus County Government. In one location, they're all sharing the same SAN, same shared storage, and using the virtualized servers, we're able to replicate that to our other data center. So our outcomes from this, from the co-location, was increased reliability. We improved our disaster recovery and availability for the school systems. The servers are now hosted in a data center with reliable power and cooling, and the server infrastructure is now backed up and distributed across the two data centers. And it's now physically and logically secured. A lot of these servers are out in the schools in different closets, so now those servers are located in our data centers behind locked doors. So it makes sense. We have two data centers, you know, have one here and one at the Human Services Center, so that's our redundancy.
And also, excuse me, also, in regards to the data, the county does not have access, well, the county is not able to access any data from the school system without the school system knowing it.
Correct, and specifically with the Cabarrus County school system, we have allocated space on the server, and they're in control of that space on what they do with
Right.
it. And once the information is put on that, we actually take snapshots, so that's what provides the redundancy to the secondary data center.
Thank you.
That works vice versa as well.
Yes, yes. That was part of that security, the risk mitigation. That was key. So we've also increased efficiency by reducing redundant cost and promoted the use of green IT by reducing the overall energy and real estate footprint of multiple agency data centers. We've reduced the data center operational costs by leveraging existing assets, using virtualization and consolidation of servers, and sharing the storage area network. And we feel like we've aligned the technology infrastructure with investments with school, county, and state business line objectives. With Kannapolis City Schools, as I mentioned, we're a little more boots on ground and working hand in hand with them. So we've had some additional projects. Over the summer, we worked with them to do an assessment of their network equipment, and we did some reallocation and improved their network infrastructure without any additional technology budget requests. One of their goals also was to have wireless in all classrooms, and we were able to help them do that by reallocating some existing hardware and a donation from RCCC of some surplus equipment. And then the virtualization of the school servers has freed up about 15 servers for their future virtual desktop project.
Can you talk about the virtual desktop project, or is that coming up?
That'll come up in just a
Okay.
second. So as you can see, we've kind of taken all these servers that are out in the schools or at administration, pulled them back into the data center, and with virtualization, you can run multiple servers on one server. That frees up all these servers out in the schools for the virtual desktop project. We also, the state ISIS timekeeper upgrade, that was kind of thrown out of left field. All of a sudden it came, and Kannapolis was scheduled for their upgrade, which required a SQL server, which they didn't have. The county does have a SQL server, and we have a DBA on site, and we have those assets. So we were able to leverage the county assets and to do that upgrade for them using what we had on hand without any additional expenditure to the school system.
Can you explain what ISIS is?
That is their state financial system, timekeeping system.
Okay.
We actually did help Cabarrus County go out and change the IP address on their clients. It's at every school, it's their timesheet, for a better word.
And also, you
it's
said we had a DVA on site, or a DBA?
Database administrator.
That system is currently, they're migrating it from a
AS400.
AS400 into a Windows server platform.
Thank you.
Timekeeper just means that's how everybody clocks in the morning, clocks out in the afternoon.
That's right, Liz knows that.
Where you get your, you don't get paychecks, you go through Timekeeper, and you can see your pay stub. If you want to print it, you can print it from there. You can find out what your leave is, your vacation time, everything is done through Timekeeper. And we better use it correctly, or
Yeah.
you get fussed at, so
Well,
it's got to work right.
We've also, Cabarrus County ITS representatives have also been attending weekly executive staff meetings at Kannapolis City Schools, and we've been discussing current projects and long-range planning, helping them make a cultural shift from individual school-centric technology purchases to kind of a district-wide thinking, enterprise planning and purchasing.
has that, in the enterprise planning, you can keep on going. On the enterprise planning, does that, it seems as though that would also increase the lifespan of an individual CPU or computer. Not greatly, but it can push it a little bit farther.
From that standpoint of, if you're all using the same equipment, you can have a better plan to be able to, schedule those upgrades and to make sure that you're doing it in a cohesive manner rather than, the onesie-twosie type scenario of the squeaky, rather than addressing the squeaky wheel or the person who happens to have a couple of dollars left over in their fund or here or there, addressing it as an enterprise. We found that, and the school's very receptive to that. It's just a matter of that they were very used to each principal requesting and doing things a certain way. And Dr. Kane is definitely heavily involved in this process with us, and we're working to try to come up with some standards for them in Kannapolis.
So in layman's terms, the silos are coming down, and it's more of a uniform approach across the board.
That's the goal. We're talking about it.
And I think it also meets some of the school system's goals too with their core. They want to make sure that all the elementary schools are, have access to the same technology, and sometimes that's difficult when one school has an involved PTO that can raise money and buy Success Maker software for that school or the upgrade, and the other schools can't. Multiple schools are using Success Maker, so we're looking at, the district should purchase Success Maker and make it available to all elementary schools. So that's the approach we've taken. And I said we would talk about VDI a little later, but I must have skipped that slide. From the virtual desktop, when we take those leftover servers with a little additional memory, we'll be able to provision anywhere from 30 to 80 desktops per server, depending on what you want to do with that desktop. For Kannapolis, this is very important for them because they had an investment of 1,200 netbooks. I think they have maybe about 900 of them that are still in use, and they're going out of warranty over the next several months. So that's old hardware, but with VDI, we can run new software on it. We'll be able to put Windows 7 and Microsoft Office 2010 and the new software, because it actually runs on the server and it's presented to that end device. So looking at extension of hardware, the life of hardware, we'll still be able to provide new technology on old hardware to the individual students. So in summary, the collaborative technology services, I think, has been fairly successful this year. In January 2010, there was a request for $360,000 to build out a secondary data facility for one school system. Using the collaborative approach, we were able to migrate both school systems into our co-located data center and provide for disaster recovery and high availability. So the collaboration of the technology staff and sharing of existing infrastructure has allowed us to effectively plan and deploy technology services in support of our citizens, staff, and students. And is there any questions?
So we saved $205,000.
At least.
At least.
Because that would have provided a secondary data center for one school system.
Right.
And no redundancy. So, I mean, the high availability wouldn't have been there for that price.
Okay. And also, in regards to, you said a one-on-one initiative. Can you explain what is coming down the pike from the state requesting on the one-to-one initiative?
I don't know that the state's requesting one-to-one, but the online testing is going to be very important in the future. The one-to-one, I think, is just something that school systems would like to put technology in every student's hand.
That means?
Mhm.
That means?
A
Putting a laptop.
or
Yeah,
a
laptop.
tablet or some
In-
type of mobile device.
And we have 28,000 children attending school?
Between the two,
Least.
it's probably closer to 30.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just in the 30,000.
Okay, 30.
Low 30s.
Yeah. And that technology, I touched those netbooks, almost all of those netbooks the other weekend, and they're 3 years old.
Yeah.
It doesn't last long in the student's hand.
Yeah, putting them in their hands to take home has been is also a shift that we recommended to stop, to be honest with you. And we'll work around that because I think it's a change that's going to affect the teacher's ability because they expected them to go home. But the way to license some of the software was directly affected by that. And also the life of the equipment, sending it home. I mean, books and things like that go through enough wear and tear, but computer hardware going out to a kid's house day in, day out was they've had some wear issues. So, but I think they're still going to get. They were definitely used. Yeah, we touched each one of them, and they got some serious use out of them. But I think with the VDI project, being able to do that across the entire school system will extend that life and hopefully reduce some of the requests for updated hardware. It's not going to end it. I mean, I don't want to stand here and tell you that it's going to say, oh, well, we don't have to fund more hardware. The idea is that with VDI, we buy thin clients that aren't full computers at that point. It's more of a $300 to $400 investment per PC rather than an $1,100 investment per computer. From that standpoint, it'll be a cost savings. Over time. At day one, it's definitely well, you'll see the request later today, but it's not a cheap investment for the outstart, but over time, we believe that there's an ROI in it.
Return on investment.
Sorry, return on investment. That's IT people.
I think that
always.
the way that things are going, all testing is done on the computer, which the students are getting used to and they like. Teachers like it because you get a immediate response from it instead of spending, your weekends grading everything. In my particular department, because of the funding, we're required, which I think is not the best solution, but we're required to give multiple choice exams, final exams. That is not a debate, that is a requirement. So, from the
State.
Perkins Act, federal.
Federal.
And so, they do all their tests online. Every CTE student in Cabarrus County Schools, at least, will do all of their testing on the computer. So we're fortunate because our department has more. But all the other ones, whether it's end of grades, end of courses, they're all moving towards doing the testing that way. The other thing I think that you're going to see a lot of, and it'll be interesting to see how this thing kind of works out, is the bring your own device idea. And it's not just a laptop, it's not just an iPad, but phones are so smart. There's all kinds of things. There was a a geometry class in the hallway today, and my initial reaction was, why are all those phones out? And then I realized that all of them had their phones out, and they were all doing geometry using their phones. And they were trying to find, the wireless isn't up yet, trying to find the place where if they, lifted their right leg and twisted their head the right way, they could actually get a signal to be able to do their work. So I think what you're going to see more and more, at least at the high school level, will be bring your own device, and how can those devices, your personal devices, be used with the filters on the wireless, so that they're not going to where they shouldn't be. And if they do, and they get a virus on their own device and on the school system's device. So I think you're going to see things moving in that direction. And I presume that you're going to be around for some of the discussion later. And I wanted to make sure of that too.
And I
So-
did not mention that in Kannapolis, we did do a successful beta test at the end of the year in a CTE class with state online testing on virtual desktops. So we ran a little beta test with that testing, and it was successful. So we were very pleased with that.
Any other questions? I for one, appreciate the efforts that you've made to, one, reduce the cost immensely. And, I mean, the cost is a third of what was asked for, and it wouldn't have covered near as much. But the effort, I think, that you've put forward, working with everybody and trying to come to some good solutions is greatly appreciated, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have discussion items for action at our regular meeting. 4.1 is a request, reallocation request from Kannapolis City Schools. And again, Mr. Crabtree's not here. Susan is here, and she can help address any questions that you might have.
I got a call late this afternoon that Will apologized. He had a family emergency, so I'm going to fill in. If there's some questions I cannot answer about this item, I'll be glad to take them down and get back with you tomorrow. But before you, they're asking for a reallocation of $446,200 of some of their projects that they're, some of the projects come in under budget, some came in over budget, so they're wanting to shift some money around. This is the first time that they have come to us asking for reallocation of the QSCAB funds. So we've been in about 17 months into the projects, and this is the first time. They wanted to come at one time and do them all at once. I did want to point out that their board approved this on June 11th of 2012, and due to some problems they were having with things that took more emergencies than coming to our board, they just have not got here to the board, our board, to get approved. We'll again apologize for that, but as you know, one of their schools opened a week late. They had some issues with some HVAC at their Kannapolis Intermediate School, so they're working through those issues. And some of the projects are going to have to be, they're not going to be able to do them. Some of the lighting at the A.O. Brown, some HVAC projects, some of the smaller elementary schools, and some parking lot work is not going to be able to be done by the QSCAB funds, but they will be able to reallocate the funds and use them as some bigger projects, like we said earlier about the HVAC at the Kannapolis Intermediate School, the chiller that was needed at A.O. Brown, Woodrow Wilson HVAC in Jackson Park. And of course, we've been talking about the Kannapolis Intermediate School roof project that needed additional funds on that one due to the bids coming in higher than anticipated. So,
Any questions concerning these projects?
Can you, I don't know if you know this answer or if Mr. Crabtree would be able to get you the answer, but I'm looking at page 14. It says Forest Park HVAC, Fred L. Wilson HVAC. It says could not do project due to budget. Could not do project due to budget. Did it come in over budget? Because it's showing here 75,000 was budgeted, less 69,800. The new budget is $5,200. Do you have any idea what?
I do. They did have to spend a little bit of money for engineering architect. These projects, they had all intention of doing all the projects when we first started the QSCADs back in April of 2011. But due to some of the more, I guess they prioritized their projects and some of the ones they wanted done first, they had to sacrifice some of the lower priority projects, and these were some of the lower priority projects that they had to stop working on They're anticipating, they're wanting to do these in the future, and there is a need for these projects, but at this time, they had to do the ones that were more important.
So is it 5,000 that's getting pulled out of the Forest, 5,200 getting pulled out of the Forest Park HVAC project, 6,500 pulled out of the Fred L. Wilson HVAC? Is that?
That's what was actually spent on those projects. We're pulling
The
out.
5,200 was used?
Yes, correct,
Okay, so 69 is being pulled out.
correct. They're pulling out the higher of the other amounts to use on the other projects. And there's no new money from Cabarrus County's, our budget is just reallocating the funds.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions concerning the reallocation from Kannapolis?
Mr. Crabtree will be here on the 17th to discuss this if you do have additional questions.
Do you know if they've already presented this to DPI for their approval?
There are certain things they do not have to get approval from DPI. They're very lenient now, and Cabarrus County, maybe Mr. Wiki can speak to that, but they don't have to go back and forth, but they're moving money between projects anymore. They did it originally, but now they do not have to. But their board did approve it back in June.
Okay.
Well, the state's not giving them money. That's the reason why they're more lenient.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, next we have 4.2. Are you going to talk about, Pam, you going to talk about it? Or?
Yes, General Statute 159-24 requires that the Board of Commissioners appoint the Finance Director's position. Mr. Downs had discussed this with many of the commissioners, and we went through a process and took the budget position, the Budget Director position, and we retasked that position once it became vacant and made that position into the Finance Director position, part of our succession planning for the future. And so we put the position out for in the application process, and we received applications, and we did interviews and selected the best candidate. And Ann Wilson, she started work a week ago, Monday, began employment on August 27th, and took over the position as Finance Director. So what our intent here is, even though the Finance Director's position in Cabarrus County is underneath the Personnel Ordinance, therefore it is not the true appointed position of the Board of Commissioners, we did want to comply with the law and have the board approve/appoint the position and put it in place. And upon doing that, once the board would do that, Ann would become the official Finance Director on September the 18th, would have full authority, her bond would be in place, and she would have the ability to do all the pre-audit certifications that would be necessary, and I would relinquish that duty as effective that same date. Also, a part of that is that she would be the signatory on our SunTrust bank account, and all the resolutions have been attached for the approval of that to take place, along with the appointment of her as Finance Director.
Any questions?
Is this something that would, I know the 18th is what you got designated. Is this something that needs to be done quicker than that, or is that adequate? I mean, is this something where we need to vote tonight, or?
Truthfully, it's adequate based on the time we have to get everything changed with the banks.
Oh, okay.
It gives us enough time to get all the signatures changed over, get with our software company, get the signature stamps made, sent off. And my bond will stay in place, so as we go through this process, we will be covered on both ends to make sure that there is no gaps. What we've decided is my bond will expire in February of next year, so we will be well covered as far as that's concerned to make sure we don't have anything that falls through the cracks. But this would give us that time to get all the administrative tasks taken care of. And of course, we'll still probably spend more time changing over other bank accounts that we have, but this was the main signatory account for payroll and general operations. We have lockbox accounts and several other different bank accounts through our insurance program that we'll need to get taken care of, and that's why I wanted to keep the bond in effect until we got everything taken care of. Surely by February of next year, we'll get it all put into place.
Did Miss Ann Wilson come from a previous county government, or?
She happens to be sitting over there with Ms. Fearrington. She had worked for Rowan County for approximately 3 years. She worked at Piedmont Behavioral Health Care for 11 years. She worked at Mecklenburg County for 1 year, and she's been a private consultant for 9 years. She has her master's in business administration. She's a certified public accountant. She's a certified fraud auditor, and she has her master's in business administration from Wake Forest University. So she has a vast experience and knowledge. The fraud part was very intriguing to us because of our internal controls and being able to utilize that as we go into the future with all the red flag information that is required. And our risk manager has been working a lot on that independently, so now he's got a resource to rely on. But we felt like this was a excellent fit for the future of Cabarrus County to move forward. Like I said, we were looking for our succession planning because, Mike, Jonathan, and I are all pretty much out there in the same number of years, so we wanted to get a head start on this position because it's one of the very key positions with the county. And she will also be responsible for the budget. So we've done another restructure. We'll move towards next of reclassifying a payroll position to a budget analyst. And we should have the finance department reorganized with the same number of positions we had before, but retasked for what our needs are growing into the future.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Okay. And the rest of the board met Ann last week. That was why. That's okay. You were out of town.
Yep.
Not a problem. But glad that you get to meet her today. 4.3, one-time projects. As you're aware, Commissioners, we have had numerous discussions about doing some one-time projects. And so at this point in time, we have a list of projects have been provided to us from Rowan Cabarrus Community College, Kannapolis City Schools, and the county. We have not received a prioritized list yet from Cabarrus County Schools, but we do have these, and so we wanted to go ahead and take a time to look at these and get feedback from you on your thoughts on the list. And also, I do want to point out that you need to go to page 177 to look at the county's list. It's a little different than the one earlier in the documents. You do want to make sure you look at the right numbers. So, Ms. Dubois, you're going to talk about these two?
Yeah, we can start with the Cabarrus County list. Mr. Billifer will be able to help with some of the projects that are on this list. We'll also need Mr. Shanley's input when you get to Kannapolis City Schools list. There's some incorporations of the IT and the virtualization that he was referring to earlier. And I also included Rowan Cabarrus Community College, even though you went ahead back in June and appropriated $380,000 to go ahead and do the expansion to the facility to, I think, was expanding the cafeteria. They did have 2 other requests, and I felt like I should at least put those back out there again for you, but you did fund one of their projects. So if we can go through the specific projects here on the Cabarrus County list if you would like, and I think between Mr. Shanley and Mr. Billifer, they can handle every one of them that's on this list. I think we'll start with Todd.
Okay. Number 1 is the MCNC fiber construction. MCNC is building that fiber network with the BTOP funds throughout the state of North Carolina. We, when they did the research.
What is MCNC and what is BTOP?
The BTOP is the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program, funded by MCNC is the, I guess, de facto state network provider, and mostly for education services. It's also, people use NCREN is also the other acronym there, but they're a nonprofit that works with the local governments specifically. But we approached them when we saw the fiber coming up Branchview Avenue and going from Union County into the research campus, and identified that as a great time for us to try to leverage some of that. And that's what that $92,000 would do, is allow us to connect our human services building and this building together. And then also that would go through dark fiber and allow us to contract with them as well for internet access through the same way the school systems do.
How does that help the county?
It's a significantly cheaper than what we would be able to do on the street, because the only part we're paying for is the leg that would go down Corbin Avenue down to Branchview, and then the piece that would also tap from Dale Earnhardt Boulevard into, and it gives us the redundancy that we spoke of earlier. That's how we get that now. We have one leg that we have from a old INET project with Time Warner Cable. That fiber's been in there probably 15, 18 years at this point. Not that fiber, I can test this all the time, that I think fiber is good for a long, long time, but at the same time, having that redundancy is going to be a great thing for us.
And dark fiber, what is dark fiber as opposed to any other fiber?
Versus leased line, and with this dark fiber, it allows us to push the bandwidth that we own the equipment on each end of that, so we're able to push the speeds at which we want to push. So we'll probably push at least gigabit, if not 10 gig, across that connection, which is...
That's just sending information from here to the Human Services Building and back and forth.
Correct.
And does that relate into efficiencies on both ends?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, that redundancy, because we have those 2 data centers at those locations, and these are our core sites, which is obviously where the largest number of employees are. That's why we chose those 2 sites as being our cores, and it allows us to replicate that data and be more efficient at that point.
And redundancy is important, that if for some reason this building shuts down, county government doesn't shut down.
Correct.
Or vice versa, the Human Services Building.
Correct. We also have our 911 data center pieces reside at these 2 sites as well.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have on MCNC fiber construction.
Okay. Number 2 came out of working with the court system when we went live with the video first appearance system. And it's also Judge Spainhour's wish that we would upgrade some of the technology in at least courtroom 1, if not the other 2 district courtrooms, to use amplification, some video. There's not actually a projector or a screen in those locations, and it's also hard for the court reporter to hear it at certain times. So we've allocated about $30,000 to upfit those locations with at least a projector and a screen, and then amplification in those district courtrooms.
And that helps with the safety of the officers not having to transport people back and forth?
Well, one of the biggest things Judge Spainhour spoke to me about in my meetings with him was when they do presentations now, they do put a screen at one location, and it's obviously pointed more towards the jury than anything else. So the judge has to move and the defendant moves, and they move closer to the other folks. I'm sorry, and your question actually was around the.
Let me back up.
Yeah.
What's happening is that when somebody's arrested and they're put into the jail, what has happened in the past is that they've actually had to physically bring them into the courtroom to then advise them of what their constitutional rights are. Right. Transporting people back and forth causes a serious safety issue in regards to the officer, as well as when they get into the courtroom, are there family members of the defendant in there? Are there family members of the victim in there? And sort of the interaction that takes place between the family members causes an issue as well. What they've been able to do is do a video consultation where the defendant stays in the jail, and they just video over, and they interact, the judge interacts what their constitutional rights are, and goes from there. So it cuts down on the safety, it increases safety for the officers so that less people are coming across, and also there's less interaction amongst the people that are in court trying to figure out what's going on with the defendant as well as what's going on with the victim's family. The problem is the only people that have access to that person on the video is the judge, maybe a court reporter, and a district attorney who has walked up to the bench to look at the little screen that's on the judge's desk. So there are people in the audience that are getting on their seat, trying to figure out what's going on, And that's causing disruption as well, which has not yet caused a problem for the bailiffs or for the people and the deputies in the courtroom, but it's just a matter of time. And also, I don't know that, but I think that what this may also be doing is if a defendant is becoming so unruly that they cannot allow court proceedings to continue, the judge has the ability with this grant or with this request to put him or her, the defendant, in a holding cell and video feed so that person still participates in the court proceeding without disrupting or being abusive towards the court personnel, the jurors, whoever else is in the courtroom. Yeah, I would suspect that's one way that this is going to be able to help as well.
It would definitely enhance that. But, again, I think it would be very difficult and a fear of the court that he wasn't getting due process based on the way it is now, because it is just a single monitor for the visitation piece. The part I was describing earlier was more during closings and things like that when they're doing a PowerPoint presentation where everybody's having to move around. But yes, that's exactly what's going on.
Does it says several of does the $30,000 cover everything that's listed? So Superior Courtroom 1, district courtrooms, microphone upgrades, video presentation ability, and the Wi-Fi?
Yes, it should, because we do have some technology already in that location with network equipment that we already have to support. So we're just talking about expanding a lot of the things that are in place. For district court specifically, there's a lot of microphones and things that already exist. So we're just talking about adding amplification in those areas. District court or Superior Courtroom 1 is the one that actually lacks really any technology at all.
Sorry, any other questions on that one? Okay.
Okay, the next 4 projects, I guess, are on me. The Senior Center upfit, this project involves reallocating space within the facility to provide additional classroom, it's actually a couple walls to expand the exercise room into a multi-purpose space. So this would be the area right when you walk into the Senior Center on the right-hand side. And this project, like the next one that's listed, are actually comprehensive. If you even go farther down the list, it's either one or the other. They could you go back to that? Yeah. So that's basically renovating about 900 to 1,200 square feet in there. It kind of depends on how much we decide to do and how much space they really want altered or changed. We have not had an architect come out there yet. We have an architect, but we want to do a conceptual design first, meaning just come out there and tell me if it physically can be done. Am I tearing down any, weight load walls that's going to hurt anything? And also I have some concerns about egress codes and building codes just because that building's so old. So really it's just kind of come out there and tell me that either my worst fears are correct or, how we're going to get around this. I'm sorry, questions on that?
I just wondered if that's been fully vetted with all the seniors so that because any change, we've seen any changes you try to make on anything out there is
Well,
often
we've
met with
not
skepticism.
gotten that far yet.
Okay.
We are responding to some of their concerns is they need more programming space. So this will convert some offices to programming space and also relocate a couple of classrooms to expand their exercise area, which will be able to pull some of the classes out of the large meeting space. And so they won't conflict, and therefore they'll be able to offer additional programs as well. You want to talk about don't go to the parking lot next, go to the next senior center one as well to keep them all together, so.
Yes, sir. If you skip down to the Senior Center upfit / expansion, that's basically encompassing the project we just spoke about, plus adding an addition to the building. Now, I've looked at the footprint over there, and I'm sure you all know the Senior Center well. There's not a lot of space to add to that building. You don't have a lot of spaces to go with it. You've got a wetland behind you, and you've pretty much got a cliff to one side of you. But basically, we figured out it's about 1,000 square feet. It's actually a little bit more. It's about 1,080 square feet that we could add right in the front by the parking lot. This would require new fire, egress doors, air conditioning unit, the whole 9 yards. And if we were to do that in conjunction with these other expansions, I believe it's some of the aging staff that I've spoken to and what they've kind of told me, they could expand a lot of the classes that they give and also expand the fitness room and I guess a multi-purpose kind of athletic room or exercise room, almost very similar to the scat room that you guys looked at on the 7th floor of the Sheriff's Administration Department, with that type of floor. Now, the price on that is because when we started talking about how we would do this space, a lot of what the input I received was certain things like, acoustical floors, acoustical partition walls, and that makes your costs go up significantly. This is nothing that's been designed. This is just what I took in and me trying to put a price tag on all of that.
Yeah, as Mr. Carruth, as you asked, we had already started looking at the building anyway, and then we're responding to some of their comments. Again, we've just hired on an architect to go out and do a schematic drawing of that and getting some different scenarios up, and then we'll run those by their staff as well as the advisory council to get some feedback.
Yeah.
How do we, if we're going to increase the opportunity to have additional programming, how do we provide programming if we're not allowed to assist through supervisors?
Well, there's two options. If our employees do not have offices in the building, they'll have offices in other locations. They will be able to come in and work those events. Right now, the recommendation of the advisory council is that they will do that with their own volunteers.
Okay.
So the option would be 3 or 4. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, the next one I'll move on to is the overflow parking lot at Frank Lisk, and this is actually going to be either 5 or 6 in terms of this project. So the overflow parking lot, apparently during different events at Frank Lisk, the parking is overwhelmed and they have to park on the grass in many of their events. They requested me to put in a CIP for the next few years for an overflow parking lot that would be very, very similar to what we've got behind ball field number 4, if you're familiar with that. Crush and run, stone, curbing, not really any lighting, just really overflow parking. And this would be on the area across from the tennis courts. If you were looking from the tennis courts up to the barn, it would be in the area right in front of you. And basically, when we looked at that, at the same time, we were also looking at possible spaces to construct 2 multi-purpose athletic fields, both for lacrosse, soccer, really anything that they wanted to other than football, I believe, to use those to be able to rent those out due to different needs that they have for fields. Well, that would also encompass an overflow parking lot in that exact same spot. So that's why those 2 projects are linked. And that multi-purpose athletic field complex, that 2.209, that is artificial turf, lights, top-notch fence, pretty much the Taj Mahal in that. I had it broken up into different phases in terms of how it could be afforded. That is the top of the line right there. It can be cut down. One of those fields could be done in natural turf. There's all sorts of different ways that we could taper it down.
Is there a reason why we'd want to taper it down in regards to natural turf when the soil base out there is so low?
No.
I mean, we can do it, but we're going to put more money into it over the next 10 years than we would if we were just to bite the bullet and do artificial.
It'll be a little less than 10 years.
Well, I'm just saying is that we'll be penny wise and a pound foolish?
That's correct. And then you also, with artificial turf, other than the heat on children's feet and what OSHA requires in terms of what the ambient temperature of that substrate can be, you will be able to open that up for a lot more play. And I'm assuming since those fields, in my understanding, would be revenue generating in some instances.
Well, the purpose of these fields, right now, we've got the soccer complex out there, but right now, based on existing contracts, it's pretty much restricted to soccer. We're getting other requests to flag football, Pop Warner football, ultimate frisbee, and I mean, they can be used for soccer as well, for additional soccer fields. So it would be another opportunity for us to have it for our Parks and Rec program, but ultimately to help us attract more tournaments to come into the town, and that's why the Convention and Visitors Bureau would be interested in it, because it would allow us to increase our opportunities or facilities for youth sports.
If this is something that the commissioners decide, I would ask you to, there's an article in this weekend's paper that referenced a high school that put in turf, and their initial cost, I thought, was about $500,000. But because they chose to use a black field, a different color, the manufacturer cut them a break and cut it down to $300,000. Now, I'm not saying we put out a black field or a pink field, but if there is an acceptable color that can be put out there and we receive a savings, then it's something to be looked at least to make a decision about when we come down to it.
Yeah, this project here, as Mr. Billiford said, this is in its very infant stages. These are just numbers that we're looking at. One thing also that these artificial turfs would allow for is, right now, based on the current conditions of the ground out there in the soccer complex, we restrict use of it to 18 and under, or under 18. This would allow for adult play, so for adult flag football leagues and tournaments, and the ultimate frisbee, most of that's adults as well, so it will allow for those to come out and play on those fields as well.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on the projects? On the county, these are proposed county projects, just for us to consider. Okay.
I believe the next list is Kannapolis City Schools.
Well, let's say the Roe and
Oh, it looks like Roe and
Cabarrus,
Cabarrus.
is it on page 23?
Yes, those were the two projects they asked for in addition. One is the building 4,000. They would like to construct a new facility for $10,800,000. Of course, that is a fiscal 2013 value. That would probably be our next debt issue, or however we choose to fund the next construction cycle. So, but I did want to point out that they did request that. And there also was a request for the land and the roadway into the Stanley Tools with the interchange change for I-85 and Highway 73. That was another request that they made. And I think Mr. Downs had some points of waiting until that interchange was completed.
Yeah, the first one is building 4,000. That's in their master plan. That is the next building will be built on the campus. So the land is there. It's already planned into their whole infrastructure out there. The second one is as you know, the double diamond interchange. The double diamond interchange is getting ready to happen there at 73 and 85. What that does is when you leave the campus and you head back towards Highway 73, the signalization and the traffic patterns are going to force you to turn right. There are no left turns. You'll turn right, go down, and have to make a U-turn and then come back and head east on 73. Right now, there's speculation or concerns that may create some backups all the way back to the campus and traffic problems. DOT does not think so. This is the concerns of the campus and their officials, that they would like to have a second entrance, and this would go out of the back of the campus and cross over a couple of different property owners to get back into the is that Stanley Drive? Is that what that's called? Stanley Drive, back there where the Stanley Tools complex is, and come back out and come out at their intersection. We've not approached any of the adjacent property owners or anything like that. Again, it's a concern right now. It's not a reality, so we would prefer or recommend that you wait, keep an eye on it, but wait and see what becomes reality once that intersection is in place and school is in session. So.
The other piece of that is we did meet with of course the Rowan Cabarrus as well as DOT, and DOT assured us that if it was not working, they would help with the fix. So rather than this be all our cost, DOT would be participating in that if they in fact find it doesn't work.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is is there any chance of getting any funding from DOT, just like your private property owner would have their business affected or whatever by a road improvement?
Well, that was Barry Moose's promise, and of course Barry is retired, but I think there were other people involved in the conversation, and it would be something that if it's not working as a design, then they assured us they would help us with the solution.
Okay, the next list would be for Kannapolis City
Well,
Schools.
before we leave that list, when we're talking about building 4,000, if that gets, as that gets moving along, I would like to know more about the programming. What are the classes that are going to be going in there? Where's the need? I know that they're increasing in enrollment, but if we build a building, or if we do decide to build a building, where are the teachers going to come from? Because I know the state's going to have to, the idea would be the state's going to pay it, but if the state's cutting their budget, then how are they going to put the teachers in there to fill it up? So, I mean, as that starts coming up, if it's during my tenure on this board, I would need some of I would like to look at more of that information, is what's going to be in there, the need for it, and sort of how that's going to fit.
Okay, the final list that we have is Kannapolis City Schools, and their list is in priority order. Losing my mind today. IT has worked with them intensively as far as their projects are concerned and incorporated their IT projects associated with that. So Mr. Shanley can go over those specific projects that are related to IT, but of course, this is their priority order, so you will see that the very first item that they had on their list was the construction of the intermediate school, but now I see that they've incorporated the virtualization project as number one.
I think that was, and I want to say that I did prep that slide, and that was my error. After talking to Dr. Kane, she did want me to emphasize that the intermediate school is the district's number one priority, but from a technology standpoint, the VDI is their number one. So, you know, I guess technically the VDI should be somewhere at number 9 because that's where the technology pieces start. So they did want to make sure that they emphasized that they have capital needs there that they wanted the board to be aware of, but also understood what was realistic to make happen this year. So to talk about VDI a little bit, I think we touched on it earlier. The goal of the virtual desktops would be to extend the life of hardware throughout all of Kannapolis City Schools. The 15 servers that we reclaimed from the earlier projects we discussed would be able to allow us to get the netbooks at A.L. Brown live for this school year. However, there will also be some additional funding that $400,000 would help us cover to buy additional servers to support the other schools, the elementary schools and the other locations. This would allow us, the $300,000+ is also licensing for VMware View software that does the actual virtualization of the desktop. From that standpoint, it does extend. We believe that it extends the life of that existing hardware. We were able to remove, through the conversations with them, this list started out as school after school requesting 64 laptops here, 36 desktops. We called out almost all of that $400,000. We took out desktop replacement projects out of this list and came up with that $400,000 plus some of the network work that we discussed earlier that we did over the summer. That core switch upgrade went from $175,000 down to $80,000. So their overall request for technology is the same, but through that collaboration and the work that we've done with them, we believe VDI is going to be extremely successful this year.
You will also see, like, the Forest Park HVAC project is back on this list that they had taken off of their QSCAB list because of the lack of funding. when they did their reallocation. So there are a few of the QSCAB projects that are on this list now. This is the incorporation of their 5-year capital plan, their capital request for fiscal year 2013, and for QSCAB projects that were not being able to be completed based on funding request. So those are basically the 3 lists that we have at this point. We have approximately $5 million that we had discussed before. Once we actually close the books at June 30th, which will be for us somewhere around October, we will have an exact number if there is something else that you might want to address of other funds that might be available. But at this current time, we're offering that $5 million that we had discussed about before for the allocation to these individual projects. And I do know that Cabarrus County Schools is working on looking for a site for the new elementary school. And I think Mr. Marshall can kind of get you through how far they've gotten with that project. And once they get that finalized, they'll be able to give us their list of priority projects.
I'd be glad to answer any questions you have about the site search. We are looking for that elementary site in the northwest part of the county. We've actually expanded the area that we're looking at, and we've identified a couple of, I think, very good potential sites that Mr. Whitkey and his staff will do the initial exploration of. But we have that group together that we've employed in the past to both find sites and then kind of go through the different processes with determining how well they would work with what we're looking for.
Do you have any idea if the land, it will be the #1 priority for Cabarrus County Schools, or will they have something else?
Perhaps Mr. Whitkey could
They
speak
don't know
better to
yet,
their
okay.
priorities. I don't think they know yet, but they have heard loud and clear from this board that, you know, they've talked about the need for a replacement school, and think this board has expressed to them, well, you don't have the land, and so they've heard that loud and clear, and we're looking for it.
Okay, so we need to consider that we do not have Cabarrus County's list at this point in time of the $5 million. We don't want to spend all of it right now, because then they have not had the opportunity to bring us their list. So
They haven't had the opportunity?
they have not gotten to the point where they can bring us their list.
Have they been asked?
They have been asked to get their list together. And it's my understanding they're working on it, hopefully very soon. So of the 3 areas that we have, the county list, the Kannapolis City Schools list, and the Rowe and Cabarrus list, and remember, we have already done $380,000 at Rowe and Cabarrus. Does anybody have any comments? Can we whittle this list down, try to get to something that, projects that anybody thinks would be kind of tops on your list of what you think we might want to look at to do some one-time projects with? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think on the Cabarrus County list, I think the fiber construction seems to be a big priority, and I think the courtroom technology. But, you know, certainly want to see what Cabarrus County Schools list would be. And, you know, I know we had mentioned this before, but I wouldn't mind seeing the planetarium on the Cabarrus County Schools list.
Exactly.
The planetarium at Central Cabarrus, yeah.
Mhm.
On their list. So that for Cabarrus County Schools, I mean, for Cabarrus County, that's, you know, obviously I think too that's important. But, you know, certainly it's hard to work without seeing the school systems list. And as far as Kannapolis, you know, they all seem to be a priority. So.
In regards to the Cabarrus County, I would say that I would rank them a little bit differently. I'd rank the fiber construction, the courtroom technology. I'd keep those 1, 2. I'd move the multipurpose athletic complex up to 3, and the reason why is that we're going to see a return on the investment on that as a county and also and small businesses that we have. I know that there's Mr. Broom is doing a tremendous job out at Rocky River, filling a lot of those, filling that fields, and that's helping out a lot of the businesses out there. So I think that we'll see a return there. And in regards to the senior center upfit, I would move those down a little bit, only because I don't know what those true costs are, or what, close to what those costs are, and what's actually, what's that mean for the senior center. I hope that at the next advisory board meeting, they'll be able to discuss that. And if they do, Commissioner Measman, if you'll let us know, because it's important that they're going to have additional programming out there. I'm concerned about how we're going to get it staffed or how that's going to be staffed. And in regards to the additional 1,000 square foot, that was what Chairman Poole brought up. And I think that's a good idea, but I wonder how that's going to fit into the request that we had of our legislatures to increase, to have a greater voting districts. And does that get taken out of the voting district so that there's not much strain on the building in regards to the voting for that one day? But I do think that that's something that we need to look at. So I would shuffle it around just a little bit with those reasons. In regards to RCCC, I believe that both of those projects right now, in my mind, they're premature until we know more about the interchange of 85 and building 4,000. I just don't know what, I don't see the quantified need right now. And I'm certain they could come in here and list it out off verbatim, but as we speak right now, I just don't see the need for it. In regards to Kannapolis City Schools, on page 24, which we have here, we don't have the funding to do the intermediate school. I do think it's important to look at the desktop virtualization project with some caveats that I'll talk to it now. If you go to the next page, it talks, I was running the numbers, and the numbers are all over the board, not all over the board. The numbers vary in regards to the cost per iPad for Forest Park, A.L. Brown, and McKnight Pre-K. It's ranged anywhere from $600 to about $750, $500 to $750. So I'm trying to figure out why the range.
To be honest, I did not prepare that piece. That's
Okay.
from Mr.
And-
Crabtree's list.
Okay,
So,
and they may have, I just don't know. And then I'm looking down at the desktops, and I'm assuming it's a typographical error in regards to Forest Park and Fred L. Wilson. They're probably wanting computers instead of CP Mooters.
Yeah. That's me.
And I was
Spell
looking
check
at
will get you every time.
I was talking about, in regards to the units, where the units, again, are on a different, the laptops versus the desktop are anywhere from $850 to $1,100, and I'm trying to figure out the cost differential there. If we're doing the virtual desktop, I forget the I. Infrastructure, then I guess we don't need those.
That's correct.
Okay, so that cost, but if we're needing to look at computers, I would like to get a little bit more hard numbers on those. Going back to the page before, page 24, in my mind, so that I would say number one stays number one, although they want the intermediate school, and I understand that. The number two would go down to the HVAC controls, Fred L. Wilson, number 5 and number 6, because that was taken out of what was requested earlier this evening. I don't know what Aruba maintenance agreement is.
That is their wireless system that they had previous, that they don't actually have an agreement in place.
Okay.
It would be tough to call that one-time money, to be honest with you. It's that's an annual agreement.
Well, then I would take that out since it's not one-time money. And based on the remaining projects, I would look at more of what impacts the students the most. How do we get a better environment for the students to sit and learn and to be educated, so that I'm certain that the parking lot at A.L. Brown and Forest Park is in need of repair, but that's not as high on my list as HVAC controls, bathrooms, and, so if I can go through these one by one, I would bore you all to death, but the idea is what's going to impact the classroom, what's going to help the teachers, what's going to help the students, is the way I would reorder these or re-rank them. And in regards to the Cabarrus County school system, I would echo what Commissioner Meismer says. I think the planetarium is a huge asset to the community, and I hope there is something there that can be done to help out Royal Oaks. We hear about it time and time and time again, and I don't see any help going out that way, and I'd love to be able to help out Royal Oaks if with some need.
Nothing really different from that. I mean, the fiber construction is big for the county as well as the courtroom. I think beyond that, like I say, I would echo what Commissioner White said about the senior center. Get a better idea of capturing what we want to do there before that would go forward. I wonder, and I know, I'm fully supportive. I think that you would see lower cost overall, life cycle cost with an artificial turf field. I think it's just something kind of like several years ago when NACO had their annual conference in Hawaii. You've got to do a lot of explaining. I think a lot of cost comparison, because some people will see that as extravagant, but I think that is certainly something that when you look at overall life cycle cost of maintaining fields, again, the soil conditions we have in this county, and then it starts to crystallize in a sense. Whoa, I'm gonna hit my mic there. I think I know after 12 years how to, where's the talk, we using my hands a lot. The other ones with the schools, again, technology, I got here, technology and student comfort and climate control, I think are going to be the two big things for me, anything having to do with that. And then so also with RCCC, I think that just got to keep that kind of out there. There's something long-term part of the overall project list, and going long-term on what we need to do and work with them on that. So,
Commissioner Burridge?
I'm okay with whatever y'all want to do.
I failed to mention two things it would be nice if this is a reoccurring amount of money that we could reduce the tax rate and make a difference. But we can't supplant one-time monies with lowering the tax rate. So that I think that's one thing that needs to be said. And second, there was some talk about the Northwest School site. I don't know if we have the money. I don't know what it's going to cost. But if that's the case, then I would ask that we look at trading out the old Odell school site to be able to help out to defray that cost. Is that they won't need the old Odell school site anymore, and we could certainly use it for something.
Okay. Commissioner Burge, are you, as far as the county projects go, which ones do you think are?
The top two on the county, the court and the, what was the first one?
The fiber.
Fiber. Those two would be most important on that, I think.
Okay. And Kannapolis City Schools?
Just the technology, I think, would be, and the whatever's best for the students.
Okay. So if we did I guess the question would be, do we want to go ahead and give, in 2 weeks, try to compile a list so that we can give some instruction to staff to go ahead and proceed on some of the projects, as we did with Rowan and Cabarrus to begin with. The ones that we could pretty much proceed with at this point in time would be the first two for the county, which is obviously these are not numbers set in stone. The first two projects for the county is $122,000. For Kannapolis City Schools, the core switch upgrades, that one wasn't mentioned, though that is technology.
It is, ma'am. That is the last two schools, the last two elementary schools that we were not able to cover with the shifting of equipment that we did this summer. They had a lot of Cisco 4500s that were placed that weren't really doing core switching jobs that we repurposed into the schools. And I believe it's Shady Brook and maybe Fred L. Wilson are the last two, and that's what that is. They are $40,000 a piece, so it's two switches.
And Of the 400,000 that you have for the desktop virtualization, on the next page 25, does that 400,000 also include the iPads and the
It does
smart
not.
boards?
The iPads and the smart board, it removes the section there below, but not the iPad. The iPads and smart boards or other items that they did not order those for me when they were submitted to me. They were also RANs, I think, is.
So should that also be included? If we
There-
were looking at doing technology?
Yes, so if you were gonna blanket say the technology that would be needed, you would need to add those numbers from that section, but not the, below the red.
Okay, if we looked at the top section there that they had asked for, and then go back a page to identify number 1, number 5, number 6, and number 11 were the ones that were pointed out. That would be roughly $930,000 at Kannapolis City Schools would be technology, all technology.
Are you also talking about the second page of the top numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
That next page, the top items.
Covers the 400, or is?
No.
That's what I'm saying, those right
Those
there.
are not, but I added those up.
That's
So-
62,400, or
Right.
anyway.
So you take that with the 867.5,
Mhm.
so you'd be around
Okay.
930,000 would cover the HVAC that wasn't done in the QSCBs and the technology issues that they had.
Mhm.
So that would allocate, just a little over $1 million
It's for new
to do those
classrooms.
projects. Okay, to do those Kannapolis City Schools projects and to do those 2 county projects. And then, of course, we've already taken the 380 out, so that would be about $1.5 million of the $5 million.
And
Right.
when does this have to be closed out, you said?
It's if we want to spend it, we can spend it, and if we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to
it's a-
spend it, we don't.
Is this out of the this is out of the $5 million,
Yes, that would allocate about $1.5 million.
and part of it's done been spent?
380 at Rowan Cabarrus for them to go ahead and renovate. We did that during the budget process.
How much land do they have out at Rowan to expand on? Aren't they getting close to?
They may, but this footprint was included in their master plan. I don't know the total size of the track out there.
I mean, some point in time, they're gonna have to move from out there, right?
Or purchase additional property.
I mean, is there additional property out there that they could purchase?
There may be a small portion to the west of them, maybe, but, yeah, they're already in multiple locations now, so that's just their main campus.
Yeah.
So all of those projects combined would be, including what we've already done at Rowan Cabarrus, which is roughly $1.5 million. That would give staff time to investigate the other county projects. Specifically, you asked about the ball fields. You would need to talk to the CVB and see if they are willing to provide any funding for that. It also would give time for Commissioner Meesmer, when he's at the senior center with their meetings, to see what they come forward with, to find out. I mean, I think that we need to, at least, at a minimum, to renovate the space that they currently have. But I understand not wanting to do that until we can get some direction and make sure where that's going. But I do think if we don't add any additional space, that we at least need to renovate what's there and make it more useful for them. So I would advocate for that as we move forward and get more information.
I got no problems, but I just want to make certain that whatever the renovations are, they are satisfied, we'll actually assist them.
Right, and I
So-
agree. I mean, I think if you feel, if everybody feels comfortable with the first 2 county projects and the ones identified with Kannapolis City Schools, we could put that on as an agenda item in 2 weeks, and they could go ahead and proceed with those.
Yeah.
And, you know, then we can still get Cabarrus County Schools, and staff can get more information concerning the senior center and the ball fields, and then we can address that in a couple months whenever we get, that information. Okay. I see Chris is nodding his
I
head,
agree.
yes?
I agree.
Yes? Are you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
How long do we, maybe this is a purely hypothetical question, but Rowan and Cabarrus provided what they want to do. Our staff has went and provided what they want to do. Kannapolis has put together a very good detailed list. How long do we wait, and hold additional monies for Cabarrus County schools?
Well, my understanding is that they're going to be discussing that either this month or next
Okay,
month.
okay.
And as you know, there will be a turnover of their board in November. So by December, there'll be a turnover. It's my understanding that they would like to get something to us prior to that happening. So I would presume, without any commitment on my part, that either in October, I would hope that in October we'll be getting something from them. I hope that it's October and not November. But, as far as spending money, we don't have to spend. We can stop here and not spend any more money. I mean, there's no requirement that we do any other projects. It's just that I know that there have been a number of conversations among this group about technology. And that's been, obviously a concern of mine since I first became a commissioner, is how to fund technology in a separate line item and be able to identify and be able to more efficiently address the need for technology that the school systems have. And so I think these ideas with Kannapolis is moving in that direction. And I'm, again, very appreciative for our staff to be working with them to kind of come up with, for them, maybe new ways of doing things that, you get used to doing things the same old way where every principal gets to make decisions, and that's fine, but there are times when, if you can centralize purchasing on things like technology, furniture, different things of that nature, then you can save a whole lot more money than every principal going out and, having to buy whatever. And they're not experts in that. They're experts in being, hopefully, in the educational environment, not experts in purchasing environment. So if we will, then we can go ahead and draft up that list and add that, we'll add an item to our agenda or work that item in there.
If we can
correctly.
revise this agenda item to list the projects that were selected by the commissioners and have those approved. If it's possible, preference would be to run all this through the general fund. We will treat like the Fred L. Wilson and the Forest Park like we do their capital outlay, and they can just turn their invoices in and we pay them as we go through that process. And for the IT projects, to put those in the technology line item that the collaborative group has had their funding in, which I think is only $24,000 for this year, but we can put that money in there and they can work together from that group. That way our IT department will work through that process and see all the invoices prior to payment.
And I'll make sure those iPads are the same price before it goes out to bid. Well, no, they should be, and I think that's been our point, and it's my fault for not catching it, that we should make sure that those are addressed as a uniform. We've seen a little bit of that already. They have some iPads in the system already, and it's an education of the iPads that you have in front of you are iPad 2s with Wi-Fi only. There's no and they're the 16 gigs. They're not. There's no reason for you to have AT&T cards in there because they're not traveling. There's a lot of that going on that it's an education. Educating educators is kind of what we've been doing, so it's fun.
Okay. If you will work that up with all those criteria. Thank you very much. The next item we have is 4.4. Ms. Dubois, again, financing ongoing projects budget amendment, phase 2.
Okay, this is the phase 2 of the ongoing projects that we reappropriated from last fiscal year. What I indicated last month was most of those projects were not grant related. We wait until the books are basically closed. And at this point, most of the projects that are on here were related to grants or funding that we received in the previous fiscal year that cannot be spent until this fiscal year. All that detail has been listed here for your review. So the budget amendment is also attached. And this should take care of encompassing those projects. I'm trying to get to the bottom number of $974,252. And this should reappropriate all the grants that were outstanding at the end of fiscal year, and there was a couple of projects that did not get picked up at the first agenda item that I did in the month of August. So we're requesting for reappropriation for these projects so they can be completed in this fiscal year.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next item we have is 4.5, Human Services, approval of additional positions for 5310 grant and related budget amendment. Randy Bass is here, Bob Bushy, and Ben Rose also. Welcome, everybody.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity. I'm very excited to bring this to you this evening. Just sort of kind of refresh your memory, since 2008, we've sort of had a freeze in place for senior services in terms of additional coverage for meal sites and other activities that the seniors provide. This past year, we did seek a grant, the 5310 grant. We've not had this grant before. It's a grant to help us expand these services into areas where we've had the freeze in place before. So as part of this process, we did ask for and were awarded 3 positions for full-time drivers to help take the seniors to the meal sites and other activities that they're involved with. And we're very excited about the opportunity to be able to work more things into that process than we've had before. So what we're asking for this evening is the approval from the board for these 3 new positions so that we can incorporate those and expand those services.
Okay, questions, board members?
So this is for no new vehicles, just for drivers?
Well, this is for those drivers, yes, sir.
Okay. And so it's just transportation for the elderly and disabled?
That's correct.
Okay.
We've had waiting lists for the last several years for some of our Lunch Plus programs and nutritional sites. This will help us eat into that
Yes.
that waiting list dramatically, and then also offer some additional transportation services to our elderly population, our
This is a
seniors.
federal grant.
Yes, sir, it is.
Any other questions or comments, please?
And they know, I mean, it says June 30th, 2014. So they're aware that if they take this position, that if funding is cut
Yes,
off that date.
that is explicitly spelled out during the interview process. That
Yeah.
This is for a 2-year grant, and we do have the option to reapply in 2 years, and we would, but there again, there's no guarantees.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, we have 4.6, ITS E911 addressing, Lee?
Yeah.
There you are. Lee Snakes is here to talk to us about this.
Good evening. DOT has contacted us about Robert Hollyfield on Boston Fisher Road. He owns a property at the very end of the road, has seen some significant vandalism. He wants to basically, he's requested DOT abandon maintenance in the last 300 feet and seeking approval from the board on this.
Okay, any questions? So they'll just,
He wants to put up a gate.
He's gonna put a gate,
And
okay.
he just understands everything past the gate is his requirement to maintain.
okay. Any questions?
If you recall, this is a 2-part process, so you'll make this request, it'll go to the board, or okay this, it'll go to the Board of Transportation, they'll come back to you for a resolution to finalize it.
I guess there'll be a public hearing actually at the board meeting, but again, the only person that's going to be impacted is Mr. Hollifield, and he's requested this.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have 4.7, Todd Shanley is gonna come back again. You're awful busy tonight. We're working you good. ITS, approval of agreement for data and phone services for Cabarrus County facilities with Time Warner Cable Business Class.
This is, again, a little similar to what Commissioner White had alluded to earlier, where we negotiated, helped the school system negotiate their data contracts. Our contract is up with Windstream at the end of this year, and we have a contract that is being sent to our attorney for review, and would like the board to authorize the county manager to sign that when legal review is over and all of the things are in place. The biggest difference in this this contract this year, it's a 36-month contract. We have adjusted or added a couple segments where the old agreement for the state franchise for the fiber that was in place for all of those years, when the state took the cable franchise agreement was in place, and when the state took that franchise, it left a gap in the what they're required to do. And the agreement that we've worked out is that as long as we pay to maintain it, we will have access to that. And again, that's dark fiber that we talked about earlier that we're able to light on with our own equipment, and it's a very large advantage to us, and we'll be doing it at a very low cost.
Okay, any questions? Okay, highlighted on page 45, you have, I don't know if that's highlighted for a reason or.
Those are the, I'm sorry, that was just, those are the couple sites that I must have left highlighted because I was looking at the Parks and Rec building, depending, when we were obviously discussing whether Parks and Rec was going to move.
So the highlights don't matter? They
don't, ma'am, not on that list. That was for me, and didn't remove it before I sent it to the clerk.
That's fine. I just wanted to verify there wasn't something there that I was supposed to understand.
That was so I made
didn't
sure
understand,
if we did not use the Parks and Rec location on Lake Concord that I removed it.
so. Any other questions concerning this agreement? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we already did 4.8. 4.9, Brent's here, patiently waiting. Write-off of 2002 real and personal outstanding taxes.
As usual, we, once a tax becomes 10 years old, we can no longer enforce collections on that tax, so we're coming to you to ask for write-off of these taxes. There's approximately $180,000 in principal, $157,000 in interest for a total of $337,000. Approximately 50% of this, $172,000 of it's all from one property that was in bankruptcy, and we were forbade to collect those taxes. So we just ask for your approval to write off these taxes.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You've been very patient. The next thing we have, we talked about last month, the legislative goals. NCACC has asked for our input. They do have to get them on or before September 17th. So we have listed our 2012 goals. Along the next page is our 2011 goals. And I don't know if you want to add anything on this.
We have not received any from the board members. The association has recommended several others. I don't know if you guys, Bob, you may, from yours, they've got a couple of large issues that they've recommended some to be on the lookout for. But
I think the biggest thing is that biggest thing we push for is always in any legislation is look for what's going to give local governments more control over their own destiny.
Right.
And expanding revenue options, things like that.
That's right.
And there is a meeting tomorrow afternoon in which, it's an internal staff meeting to discuss the whole process. So, I'll have some insider information after that, so for everybody. So as far as how the
what
process
we
work this year.
can do is go ahead and sort of condense these lists that you've got here from the last couple of years, put them, revisit and put them out there so that you'll have them on your agenda for 2 weeks. So if there is anything else that you want to add that you're thinking about, let me know in the next couple of days and we'll get them on.
Only thing I've got is, I know that you were there for part of that Friday, but the Soil and Water Conservation District had a legislative tour of some facilities. There was an extensive discussion that took place out at the Suther Farm on some of the cost sharing, some of the trust fund things that we talked about even tonight with this conservation easement, about that funding either being protected or restored by the legislature. I know that Representative Johnson, Senator Hartzell, Representative Pittman was there, as well as Commissioner Carl Ford, who is, I guess, going to be the next representative for the eastern part of Cabarrus County. And they had a packet they gave us. Including that was 12 different action items, 7 different policies and positions, and 12 action items that the state board of conservation, soil and water conservation, has already adopted. Now, I don't think y'all want me to go through each one of these individually tonight, but I thought I'm going to give them to Kay to maybe scan or distribute to anybody that wants. If we want to add on, what do we want to consider these and adding into our goals, and reiterating, reemphasizing these goals with the state Soil and Water Conservation Board has already put forward for their goals. But I'll give those to her, or she maybe get the copy from Mr. Testerman. Yeah, so.
You can get those to her, then she can get those to us. If you look at the goals from last year and the year before, anything that, that's kind of been taken care of course, we don't need to have on there. We can pull those on and come up with the list. And then we'll go over the list again in 2 weeks and make sure that, we agree with all of them. If there's anything in those 2 lists, commissioners, that you don't want on there for some reason, then please make sure you let county manager or Ms. Honeycutt know. Because I think that, if we put forward a list, we all need to agree to it. That needs to be a unanimous list. And so if there's something on there that anybody has some real heartburn with, then we kind of need to know that, and we can make adjustments. Any other comments on the goals? Okay.
I had just a couple. One of them is that, and I know we're still right in the middle of the initial phases of it, the results of it, but do we want to talk about anything having to do with any kind of legislative stuff that needs to be done in regards to the court decision that was made from the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago involving the APFO and some of the ramifications long-term of that?
Well, we're going to talk about that in closed session tonight.
That's what I figured. That's what
litigation, but aside from that, certainly any sort of legislative action to correct some of the aspects of that decision would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing was that I know that the association is still looking for folks who are willing to serve on the steering committees. So any of y'all interested in doing that? It's a very interesting process. Legislative Goals Conference will probably be held sometime in it's right there in front of it, January. And this is the first one conference I'll have where I won't have to be worried about whether I'm a staff person or commissioner. So, so we encourage you to participate in that. Very fun time is had by all.
Okay. Next we have is the regular meeting agenda for approval. So if you'll look at page 152, well, I have 152. We've got, if you look at 153, right now we have everything placed under consent. Of course, item number 3, instead of discussion of one-time projects, we'll rework that one based on the comments from Ms. Dubois. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone would like to have moved to new business?
Does the human service? Number 6, the human services project, since that's going to be a budget amendment, does that need to have a public hearing, or? I don't think it does, but, okay.
Public hearing took place in January.
Okay.
I mean, if, the way it looks right now, it'll be a very short meeting in 2 weeks. 410?
The goals. 410.
Oh, 410, on the legislative goals, I'm sorry.
Legislative goals.
It'll be F1.
To approve those, to
Okay.
approve those.
You want to put, we can put F1 under new business? Just to make sure that we agree
Discussion
on
the
everything.
goals.
Okay, and then we'll, everything else will stay under consent? Yes? Looking for head nods. Commissioner White, are you okay with that, or do you want to? Is there anything else?
I was
that you would
hoping,
like
though,
to
that
move?
we, you know, being this is Ms. Honeycutt's last meeting with us, that she would get her goal finally accomplished that she's been searching for 8 years, and that is for us to have everything on consent agenda for a meeting.
Well, she would have done that except for you, Commissioner CARRUTH.
Very close. If there are no other suggestions to move any items, then I would accept a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda, moving F1 down to G1.
So moved.
I have a motion. I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We do have need for closed session tonight to discuss threatened or pending litigation and to preserve the attorney-client privilege as authorized by NC General Statute 143-318-11A3. We also need to discuss economic development and personnel, General Statute 143-318-11A3, 4, and 6. In closed session, we would like to invite in Jonathan Marshall for the personnel issue and EDC, for the economic development issue. So this time I accept a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We are in closed session.